Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished individual from Pune, India, Mr. Nithya Shanti. Nithya, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Ashutosh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Nithya is a public figure, a facilitator, and an ex-monk. So, Nithya, let me start by asking you the first question. Tell me about your own amazing journey and what first sparked your interest in spirituality and inner growth.
Amar Chitrakatha comics, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I would read those comics, and somehow I was more attracted to the rishis and the sadhus in that comics than the kings and all the other stories. I used to love reading Amar. In fact, it was a big discovery. One day coming home, I used to always have my mother read them to me. And one day she wasn't available. So I was kind of really irritated. She's not there. And then I looked at it carefully. I said, wow, I can read. It was like a discovery that I can read myself. Of course, slowly, of course, with just learning the alphabet. And I just fell in love with reading. And I think that was the first interest. And I have photographs of me at about, 4, 5, 6 years old, sitting and pretending to be like a rishi over there. And so I don't know where these impressions come from. In India, they're called sanskaras. So, but somewhere there is a sanskar in me towards these kinds of things from a very early age, which I can't fully explain. And yes, more specifically later on, went to an Aurobindo school. There's a school called Mirambika in Delhi, which is based on Sri Aurobindo's teachings. There was, again, it was beautiful that they were not directly teaching us spirituality, but the atmosphere was one of trying to practice Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga. So there was something there. And the most concrete one would be going for a Vipassana course at the age of 16. And then getting a very tangible practice to do on a regular basis. And then that very quickly, in my case, created a lot of shifts and a lot of openings. And at a certain point felt like, I have to really dive deeper into this. I'm not okay with just skimming the surface. So led me to becoming a monk at some point.
Wow. And, you mentioned that just now that, you went for Vipassana at 16. How has your journey with meditation evolved since then?
Yeah, they can be, it's been from the age of 16. I'm about 46 now. So that's a lot of years. And many evolutions, but very broadly, I would say in the beginning, very painful at all levels, physically painful, emotionally painful, mentally painful. There is a kind of metamorphosis happening. There's a kind of a transmutation happening, thinking process, emotional process, physical process. In my case, a lot of shame came up, a lot of guilt came up. I felt I'm not good enough. I guess it was there in any case. I just became aware of it. I felt that, like I would get very angry with myself for losing mindfulness. I would get very angry at myself for maybe fighting with my brother. Once I learned, before that I said, yeah, that's the way. But once I learned these things, I was like, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? Why do I get angry? Why can't I practice the things I know? What's wrong with me? Then, of course, as a teenager, you have, passion, lust, all of that. And, my relationship with that if I would ever masturbate, I would feel very, very, very shocked at what have I done. So dealing with all of these ideas about myself, that was the first stage. And little by little, a kind of a dissolution happening, energy beginning to flow more. I felt a pain in my heart for almost the first 3-4 years, continuous pain in the heart, which the Sufis consider to be like a sacred fire that burns in the heart. It is the purification process that happens. And yes, more and more stabilization, more and more clarity, at some point becoming a monk. One big stage, one big point in the practice was what some people call figure ground reversal. Figure ground reversal is, normally you assume you're a human being living life. But suddenly it can shift into this is life living itself. Or put it in more simpler words, I imagine I'm meditating in the room. And then it shifts into, in the space, there is this experience happening. So it's a figure ground. What you imagine yourself to be, you're no longer that. That was an important stage of the practice for me. There have been many stages in the practice as well as it matures. And it comes to a place, broadly, it comes to a place of more spontaneity, more freedom, and less trying to create an impression or make an impression and calculate how things are going to go your way. That's the broad opening that happens.
Yeah, very interesting. And Nithya, what were some of the challenges you faced in your spiritual journey, and how did you overcome them?
In my case, the challenges were self-doubt, not feeling good enough, a deep fear of death. In my case, this was very interesting. In my case, even though I was quite young when I began, somehow the taste of impermanence went deep enough that I just felt everything is slipping away. This life is going to be over soon. This life's going to be over soon, which is very strange for someone who's so young.
Yeah.
But they really felt like an urgency that if, this life is going to be over in no time. And one has to get this, like there is something to be done here. I cannot lose that opportunity. That was a very deep fear, which in a way was a good fear because it motivated me to do things like becoming a monk,
Right.
and not get distracted in other things. And then the obstacles remain, but they get more and more subtle. Like, they say in Course of Miracles, which is a spiritual teaching, they say you go from a bad dream to a good dream. And there comes a point in this practice where it becomes a good dream. You're grateful most of the time. You're calm most of the time. You're in a state of love and compassion most of the time. It's a good dream. Things are working out. Work is working out. Relationships are working out. But it's still a dream, right? Yeah. And now there's less motivation because now it's a good dream.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will stop at this point because life is good. Why do you need to do anything? You can play golf. You can hang out. We can, but it's still a dream. And so then the Buddha says, don't stop. There's more work to be done. And continue the inquiry of who is having the good dream. Who is the dreamer? Is there a dreamer? So I would say it gets subtler and subtler. And one has to, I wouldn't call it like an obstacle, but it's a stage in the process where one has to keep on looking at now the subtler and subtler impediments that keep coming.
Very interesting. And when I was preparing to have my conversation with you, I came across this very interesting word, which I've heard very often, awakening. I want to ask you, how do you define awakening, and what does it practically mean for a common human being in today's world?
Yeah, good question. It's quite simple, actually. It doesn't have to be complicated. Usually, if you look at our day, much of the day is spent with thoughts about the past or the future. You may not even notice them, but okay, what am I going to say next? What am I going to do next? What just happened? And the present is almost like a means to that imaginary future. Or trying to, whatever you thought you had in the past, or you don't want to repeat that in the past. So the present just happens to be there.
Right.
So that is usually the first stage of most people. We're mostly in the hallucination of past. It's like a hypnotic trance. The hypnotic trance of past, the hypnotic trance of future. Then stage 2 is with mindfulness, meditation, and all of that. You start noticing, oh, I'm the observer. This is happening. So there's much more presence. You're less in the hypnotic trance of past and future. You're in the now. But there's still a sense of I'm observing the now. Or in the case of meditation, I'm the meditator. Right? So this is stage 2. And one can spend a lot of time in stage 2. And then there is stage 3, where even the hypnotic trance of I'm the meditator, I'm the observer, that dissolves. And that, I like to call it, meeting life without stories. When you meet life for stories for the first time, in Japan, it's called satori, which I think is a nice word. It's close enough to story. Satori is the awakening. It's a glimpse. So the first time you realize, wow, I'm not an ice in the river. I am the river. So a very deep knot, it's like an energetic knot. It's a conceptual knot, a sense of being me, not just at an intellectual level, but at an actual level that not just dissolves. And that is the first experience of awakening. However, awakening is not enlightenment. Awakening is still, it's a glimpse, right? It's a powerful glimpse. It's an important glimpse.
Yeah.
You will still come back into the sense of an embodied separate self. But now there's a difference. You know that there is something beyond this. So now the knot is lighter and lighter, more and more loose, more and more open. And so there's a lovely Zen teaching. First get awakened, then work out your karma. First get awakened. So we say, first I'll work out my karma, then I get awakened. But in many of the higher teaching, they say no. Like in Advaita Vedanta and Dzogchen, they say start with the view. What is the practice? Your practice should be the goal. Your goal should be your practice, whatever your goal is.
Right.
Make the goal your practice. And that's how awakening is understood in this context.
What a great response. Thank you. Fascinating. My next question is, how do you blend ancient teachings with contemporary learnings, especially when you are speaking to so many people?
I like to do it like this. And that's one of the reasons I left my monk life also, is I don't want to be wedded to any perspective, not even the Buddhist perspective, not even a fantastic perspective, not even my own perspective from 10 minutes ago. I don't want to be wedded to it. I don't want to create a new system, a new philosophy that, hey, this is the ultimate, let me explain it to you. So whatever from that ancient is alive for me now. Like Adi Shankara says, prarabdhaya samarpitam, which means whatever karmas are emerging, whatever things you can change and cannot change in your personality, in your life, samarpita means deeply trust, deeply surrender, deeply give yourself to that. Now, in a moment where that comes up as an ancient teaching, timeless teaching, and I may say that it's alive. So right now it's alive. And then something I read in an article, a scientific article yesterday about gratitude, for example, or about, the importance of being out in nature enough. And that's alive for me. Then that is no less valid than Prarabdhaya Samarpitam, because that is equally true for me in the moment.
Yeah.
So the way I do it is I don't really try to blend any teachings. I just check in the entire spectrum of my awareness in any moment, my interaction with you or with a group or with anybody. If what's alive, I go with the spirit of aliveness. And that's how I take it. And to some extent, there will be an integration that happens in the process.
Fascinating. So moving on now, Nithya, my next question is, how do you connect well-being with spiritual development? Or is there a connection at all?
There is a connection, but it's not as obvious or as direct as it seems. Because it is possible to be very spiritually awakened, advanced, for example, and still be diabetic, and still maybe eat fried foods, and maybe still not have the best sleep rhythms and all of that, right? And it is even possible to be pretty grumpy. There are actually fully awakened people who are pretty grumpy and not such fun to be with. And I don't think it automatically goes that if you had a spiritual awakening, you're a nice, likable fellow. In fact, it's amazing that you don't really care about those things so much anymore, because the normal sense of who I am, what I should get, those calculations start dissolving, right? So there is at one level a profound ease which shows up with accepting yourself exactly the way you are. In fact, before our podcast, this thought came to me that perhaps the fastest way to enlightenment is deeply embracing your lack of enlightenment. So and in that sense, there is a well-being. But there are other factors of well-being which we are finding through science, for example. Like, for example, a lot of spiritual folks don't exercise much. I've been a victim of that. And I've had to literally bring in exercise, because I find that so much research has been found that exercise is so important for our well-being. Eating the right kind of food in the right proportions is so important for our well-being. Right sleep is so important for our well-being. In our interpersonal, this is another big place. There can be huge interpersonal blind spots. There can be even huge ideological, like there are Japanese enlightened Zen masters who remained very jingoistic, who remained very captured in their nationalistic idea. I found some of my own teachers in Sri Lanka. At one level, they're so wise, but at one level, they're so caught up in their Sri Lankan ideology of Sri Lankan Tamil. I was like amazed at how at one level you're so open, and at one level you're still caught up. So I don't think it automatically translates that a deep spiritual development automatically translates into a well-rounded, integral development in terms of well-being. I think there can be different parallel paths sometimes.
What a great response. Thank you. My next question is, based on all the work that you do with so many people, what common obstacles, in your opinion, do people face on the spiritual path? And I find there is a general increase in awareness of spirituality amongst the young as well. So what common obstacles do they face, and how can some of them be overcome?
The most common obstacle for all of us would be identification with our own thinking process, identification with our mind, and believing everything we think, and not feeling enough, getting caught up. Like you're thinking something is making you all stressed and all angry and all not. You're not noticing that. Your body's saying, hey, stop, where are you going? But we're caught up in they did this and I should have and they could have. And we're so caught up in that. We're not noticing it's really damaging our well-being in the moment. So being identified with thought, not knowing that emotion, every kind of emotion, pleasant and unpleasant, is just feedback. It's simply that. Just like physical pain and pleasure is feedback. Body is saying keep doing that, excellent, or stop doing that, not good. Emotional pain is also feedback. And it's just telling us, look at what you're focusing on right now. Look at what you're believing right now. Look at what you're thinking right now. It's just feedback. It should be there. We should have so-called negative emotions. I would call them unpleasant emotions. We should have them because they give us instant feedback as to what we're believing. And so to understand the true nature of emotions and not like the big change that's happened for me, and this is part of the deeper understanding of spirituality, is that doesn't mean you never get angry, never get afraid, never get jealous or all of that. It's a chance to expand your view. What am I believing about myself, about you, about life? There's something I'm believing. That's what's creating the tightness. So I would say it's a journey from identification to more and more. In the beginning, it's witnessing, but then it even goes beyond witnessing into it's just happening. Like life is just happening. Life without a center, some people call it, which is a very nice way of putting it. And also from a lot of lack of trust, like in my case, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, towards more and more and more deep trust that even like one of my friends, Kiran, he says that while it is your divinity that attracts them, it is your humanity that makes it accessible. To make it more real, my teacher Ajahn Chah, he was a great Thai monk, they wanted to write his biography, but they didn't write a biography. They wrote a hagiography, which is all about how amazing he is. He was born with supernatural powers and this and this. And he looked at that and he said, what nonsense. You're not going to publish this. You're going to talk about my doubts. You're going to talk about my fears. You're going to talk about my laziness. Although in his case, it wasn't laziness. It was the other end, over exertion, over enthusiasm. Right. You're going to talk about my the time when I once had a hard-on for 1 week. And they're like, oh my God, you're a celibate Buddhist monk. I had a hard-on for 1 week and I couldn't get through it, right? He said, I want you to talk about that, because when you talk about that, people realize, wow, it's available to all of us. If you portray it like I was born under the Bodhi tree, under the perfect constellations. So this is what's beautiful. Like you really trust that wherever I am in my process is exactly where I need to be. It doesn't need to match anybody else's journey. In my case, it was a letting go that my path has to mirror the Buddha's path or Guru Nanak's path or anybody Kabir's path. It doesn't have to. This is my path. And while I can take inspiration from them and guidance from them, I don't have to mirror or match their path, even a little bit.
Very well said. My next question to you, Nithya, is that given the kind of pressures and demands modern living has, how can one balance all our day-to-day pressures with our spiritual, spiritual life or spiritual aspirations?
It's a very deep question, because how many of these pressures are imposed on us and how many are we participating with?
Correct.
Right? How many of them are our own idea? Yesterday, someone messaged me and said, Nithya, after your session, I realized I'm putting pressure on myself to be a CEO by this age. This is pressure I'm putting on myself. Instead of focusing on doing my best, enjoying the journey, I've made it by this age, I should be a CEO. What is this? This is a self-putting, you're putting pressure. You can't enjoy the process of and there will be ups and downs in your corporate life. You will think they'll work out, things will not work out. You've made this arbitrary goal that by X age, I have to be a CEO, I have to be a startup founder, I have to be a millionaire. This is pressure you're putting on yourself. Nobody's putting that pressure on you. So I wonder how much of it is modern life and how much of it is us buying those values and not questioning those values. One simple exercise I'll give all our viewers today, listeners, viewers, is really write an essay, or at least write a few pointers of what is your definition of success. Yes, we know what your parents want and society wants and celebrates, all of this Instagram, number of Instagram followers, money in the bank, number of cars you have, which part of town you live in. Fine, we know that. But is that really for you? Is that going to really excite you? Is that kind of house in town with those many number of cars, that much affluence or reach, is truly that your value system, or is that a taken on value system? In my case, a shift happened. I wrote my own obituary when I was doing my MBA. In Stephen Covey's book, First Things First, I think it was, he mentioned, write your own obituary, write down what people will say about you when you die.
Yeah.
And I did that, and it just blew my mind. No one was talking about how much money I earned in my obituary. No one was talking about how famous I was, how many newspaper covers I'd been on. They all talked about the kind of person I was, how they felt being with me,
Yeah.
if they trusted me or not, if they felt I would be there for them or not. And that completely shifted my idea of success. And that enabled me to go in a direction I would never have been able to go if I defined success in those ways that were given to me.
Very well
So
said.
this is the responsibility of each one of us. Like
Yeah.
I have a friend, Kavit, in London. I spent a week with him there. And I said, Kavit, how come? Because he's actually a multimillionaire. I said, Kavit, how come you have not once in this trip answered phone calls, looked at your email? I don't see you distracted. I see you so present with me. And he said, Nithya, I made a decision long back that I want to be rich, not just in money, but also in time. My idea of success is abundance of money and abundance of time. I found that so amazing. How many of us are abundant in money, but we have no time to spend with our families, no time to enjoy our abundance?
Absolutely.
Then what kind of abundance is that? It's just it's a new kind of prison you created for yourself. So this is our responsibility. Those pressures will come down when you ask yourself those kind of questions.
Fascinating. So I have time for two more questions for you. There is a lot of conversation that keeps happening on the subject of inner peace. And, part of it you've given me with the example of your friend, abundance of time, abundance of money, and he must be, satisfied in his own mind, calm. But I want to ask you, how does one cultivate and maintain inner peace?
My name is Nithya Shanti. Shanti means peace, and
absolutely.
Nithya means unchanging.
Yeah.
So there are two kinds of peace. One is the peace of a peaceful environment, people saying good things to you, no one's bothering you at the very least, no mosquitoes in the room. The peace of no massive emotional surges coming up. This is one kind of peace. And then there's the deeper peace. This is the deeper peace of the depth of the ocean bed, the ocean floor, where not a single grain of sand is moving.
Yeah.
That's a different peace. So no matter what storm is going on top of the ocean, deep down, 5-10 kilometers down, it is absolutely still.
Yeah.
And so my name, Nithya Shanti, which is a self-chosen name, by the way, is a reminder to me that seek that peace, which is not based on circumstances. And it is something which is at one level has to be cultivated, but at the other level is always there. So maybe more than cultivated, the right word is recognized. Recognize the part of yourself. And I can almost guarantee that every single person listening to this has had a time in their life, in the middle of a fit of anger, in the middle of something going massive emotional, one moment where you say, what the hell am I doing? Why am I going down this road again? Just one micro moment. It's like in the middle of all of that, like, do I really need to do this? Do we really have to do this all over again? And that's a moment of clarity, sanity. But then again, of course, we've lost. So we're drowning again in the ocean of our strong emotional surges. So the fact that we all have that can be recognized, cultivated, and ultimately you rest there. That becomes, like I said, a figure ground reversal. Instead of assuming yourself to be these thoughts and emotions and bodily states, you ground yourself in I am that. Stainless sky-like awareness, within which all of this is happening. And even that, of course, is a subtle duality of I am that and I am this. But it's a good starting point. And then from there, there's a beautiful merging that happens.
Yeah.
Where it's all okay. Even your angry, upset states, it's part of the Leela, it's part of the divine play. And it's really fascinating that the greatest teachers tell us confusion is wisdom. It's amazing when they say confusion is wisdom. Forgetting is compassion. I mean, this just blows your mind. How can it be?
Correct.
But it actually is true.
Very well said. Very well said. And my last question to you, Nithya, and this is for our audience. What would you say is a message to the world that, based on all your incredible knowledge, and we've not even scratched the surface of it in this short podcast, and I hope to do another one with you sometime. But what would you say is one message to the world?
If I have a message, it's very simple. It is trust your process. There is an imagination that you should be somewhere else. You should be doing other things. You should be, by now you should have achieved more, learned more, become more. At least spiritually, you should have grown more. Any such idea of I should be, could be, would be, life should be, could be, would be, you should be, could be, would be. What is it like to just drop it for a moment and come to the place of this is such absolute perfection unfolding.
Mm.
It is so perfect, it even includes your ideas of imperfect.
Mm.
It includes that, it embraces that, it even gives space for that. It is that perfect. So I would just call it in 3 words: trust your process.
Amazing.
And deeper levels of trusting our process.
Amazing. Nithya, on that note, and your amazing set of 3 words, trust your process. I mean, it says so much. And I hope my viewers and listeners will take away a lot from just these 3 words. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think we barely scratched the surface on so many different aspects of your journey, of meditation, of awakening. But we did talk about all these very briefly. Thank you also for speaking to me about inner peace. And of course, so many different aspects that we can look at to make ourselves better human beings. I love the example you gave me of the ocean. You know, as you were telling me, it made a lot of sense that while there's a lot of turmoil on top, deep down, not even a grain of sand moves. I think that's a very powerful observation. Most of us probably had never even thought of, though we've seen it. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.